Greek mythology teems with daring champions, astonishing exploits, and tales that linger in the memory. Yet, of all its storied figures, none endured ordeals as remarkable as Hercules, the son of Zeus. Like many legendary narratives, Hercules' story begins with the potent passion of Zeus, supreme ruler of Olympus. The god's heart pounded when he beheld Alcmene, a mortal maiden whose reputation for beauty extended across all of Greece. Alcmene's allure went beyond mere looks. Her gentle nature and kindness captivated everyone who crossed her path. Still, Alcmene was already married to Amphitryon, the noble king of Tiryns, renowned for his valor and prowess in battle. One day, Amphitryon received orders to lead his forces against the formidable city of Thebes. Sensing an opportunity in the king's absence, Zeus resolved to visit the queen. Assuming Amphitryon's exact likeness, Zeus descended from Olympus on a moonlit night, gliding through clear skies under the silvery glow. No sentinel at the palace gate detected the deception. So perfect was Zeus's imitation. Alcmene, elated by her husband's supposed homecoming, welcomed him with heartfelt joy and affection. That night, Alcmene surrendered herself to the embrace of the god, convinced she was with the man she adored. Their union was warm and tender, and the mortal queen could not fathom that this encounter would reshape not only her fate, but that of the entire world. For from that divine and human bond, an unparalleled hero was soon to be born. After many grueling battles, Amphitryon finally returned triumphant to Tiryns. Yet his jubilation quickly turned to fury when he discovered Alcmene was expecting a child. Convinced of her infidelity during his absence, the king's shame and rage compelled him to decree that Alcmene be burned at the stake, as a dreadful warning to others. As the queen faced this horrific punishment, Zeus intervened, driving back Amphitryon, who had threatened the innocent queen. In a voice that echoed throughout the palace, Zeus proclaimed that he himself fathered one of Alcmene's unborn children. She was also carrying Amphitryon's heir. Confronted with this revelation, Amphitryon's rage began to ebb, replaced by a sense of honor. He recognized the privilege of raising a son of the most powerful of gods, and immediately forgave Alcmene, embracing her with renewed devotion. Zeus had lofty ambitions for his mortal offspring. An ancient oracle declared that the first great-grandchild of the famed hero Perseus would one day rule the glorious city of Mycenae. Since Alcmene was Perseus's granddaughter, her child would inherit a rightful claim to the throne. Still, destiny held other designs. Hera, Zeus's enraged and jealous wife, could not bear another betrayal. Driven by spite, the goddess summoned Eileithyia, mistress of childbirth, instructing her to hasten the birth of Eurystheus, the son of Alcmene's cousin. Because Eurystheus was born prematurely, Hercules lost his claim to Mycenae's throne before he entered the world. Unbeknownst to Hera, she had steered Zeus's son toward an even grander destiny, one fraught with trials beyond imagining. Alcmene watched her two sons with equal tenderness, yet she sensed that Hercules carried a divine spark, filling her heart with both pride and trepidation over his precarious future. Amphitryon felt boundless pride as well, not only as the father of Iphicles, but also as guardian of Zeus's child, fully aware of the vital role he would play in raising a hero marked for greatness. Hera's envy and wrath reached unparalleled heights. Humiliated by the birth of yet another of Zeus's illegitimate offspring, she seethed before all of Olympus and the mortal realm. In her unrestrained fury, the goddess dispatched two venomous serpents to kill the unsuspecting infants, believing that their deaths might assuage her anguish and shame. Under the cover of night, the snakes slithered toward the cradle where Hercules and Iphicles slept, oblivious to the divine vendetta stalking them. Iphicles' terrified wails shattered the pre-dawn stillness, rousing Alcmene in panic. Shocked and half awake, she beheld the two enormous serpents crawling up the bed toward her sons, and felt her heart seize in dread. In that instant of sheer horror, Alcmene witnessed the unimaginable. The tiny Hercules, eyes ablaze with fearless determination, had gripped the snakes and squeezed them with a strength no infant should possess, until they lay motionless, strangled by the small yet mighty hands of Zeus's son. The initial shock gave way to wonder and awe, confirming the extraordinary power of the child destined for legend. Fearing further retribution from Hera, Alcmene made a heart-rending decision. Aware of the unrelenting vengeance of the Queen of the Gods, she trembled at the thought of losing her son in a crueler manner. With tears streaming, she carried the infant Hercules into a distant forest. There, with aching reluctance, she left him on a remote path, hoping that someone merciful would discover him and shield him from Hera's relentless wrath. Yet fate had already marked a special course for the young demigod. By chance, or perhaps divine design, two regal figures soon walked that very trail after Alcmene departed. They were Athena, wise goddess of war and wisdom, and Hera, the child's sworn enemy, strolling through the woods while discussing matters among the gods. The goddesses noticed at once the abandoned infant, unaware that this tiny being was Zeus's illegitimate son. Captivated by the child's striking beauty and vigor, they approached to examine him more closely. Amazed by his unusual strength and liveliness, Athena chose to bless the baby, granting him unmatched courage and keen intellect, gifts that would prove invaluable on his path. Hera, moved by the seemingly fragile child and ignorant of his true identity, went further. She offered him her own breast, allowing him to taste her divine milk. Such celestial nourishment would bestow on Hercules a strength surpassing that of nearly every other demigod. Yet Hercules was ravenous, and the baby's force was so great that as he drank the divine milk, Hera felt an intense pain. The Queen of the Gods quickly drew him away, but a spray of her celestial milk escaped, arcing spectacularly toward the heavens. Thus the Milky Way appeared, forever marking the sky with the divine power of Hera and Hercules. Watching closely, Athena suddenly recognized the child as her half-brother, the son of Zeus and Alcmene. With a solemn expression, the goddess declared that she would return the baby to his rightful mother. Hera, realizing the grave mistake of nursing her rival's son, felt her rage flare anew with twice the fervor and vowed to torment that child for the rest of his life. Athena brought the child back to the safety of his home. Alcmene received Hercules with overwhelming joy and relief. Comforted by Athena's calm and resolute words, the goddess had personally guaranteed the young Hercules' protection until he reached adulthood, allowing Alcmene to at least breathe freely, confident in her son's glorious destiny. News of the baby's return quickly reached Tiresias, the famous seer of Greece. In a firm, convincing voice, he proclaimed before all, "Let us celebrate the return of this prodigious child, for it is written in the stars that he will free the world from its most dreadful monsters and creatures. Through his magnificent deeds, one day he shall earn a place beside his father, among the gods of Olympus." From his youth, Hercules, the mighty son of Zeus, displayed clear indicators of the greatness that lay ahead. His prodigious strength, unwavering bravery, and remarkable skill in battle were already renowned throughout Greece. Even before the famous 12 labors, Hercules had earned a notable reputation with impressive feats. While still quite young, he fought in epic battles, overcoming perilous creatures and facing warriors feared across the land. His unparalleled courage and strength shone in confrontations with ferocious lions, threatening giants, and legendary beasts that terrorized entire villages. These early heroic achievements helped solidify his growing renown, foreshadowing the glorious and arduous fate that awaited him. King Eurystheus, though he occupied the mighty throne of Mycenae, was known for his insecure and fearful nature. Unlike Hercules, Eurystheus lacked notable courage or strength, and often hid behind his castle walls at the slightest threat. His reputation among his subjects was marked by scorn and a lack of admiration, for all knew his authority had been unfairly won through Hera's vindictive influence. Aware of his own shortcomings, Eurystheus deeply resented the heroic and imposing presence of Hercules, seeing him as a constant threat to his fragile rule. Yet, despite being admired and respected by many, Hercules was forced to exist under the shadow of King Eurystheus. Since Hera had ensured that Eurystheus ruled Mycenae, Hercules was deprived of his rightful claim. It was with profound disgust that Hercules obeyed King Eurystheus, a man he considered inferior in strength, courage, and virtue. When Eurystheus imposed the first labors on him, the young hero's indignation grew unbearable. Determined to understand his fate, Hercules went to consult the famous Oracle of Delphi, seeking to learn whether he was truly obliged to bow to the whims of his usurping cousin. The Oracle of Delphi stood as one of the most sacred and revered sites in ancient Greece, located within the temple dedicated to Apollo. Regarded as the spiritual center of the Greek world, kings, heroes, and ordinary folk traveled from everywhere for counsel and guidance about their futures. The oracle's priestess, known as the Pythia, would enter a trance and communicate directly with the gods, revealing prophecies that often shaped important political decisions and the personal destinies of those who sought her wisdom. Her words were treated as the expression of divine will, holding the power to influence the course of history and human lives. Inside that sacred temple, the oracle's priestess delivered an unexpected prophecy to the young hero. Each labor Hercules undertook would not only diminish the dishonestly obtained power of Eurystheus, but also amplify his own glory and renown among mortals and gods alike. Despite the encouraging promise, Hercules felt restless and frustrated, for in his heart he still harbored hope of being freed from the humiliating orders imposed by his despised cousin. Unbeknownst to him, this vulnerability opened the way for the cunning and vengeful Hera to intervene once more in his life, preparing to cast an even darker, more devastating shadow over his path. Hercules, still shaken by the prophecy that had failed to bring him the relief he sought, sank into deep anguish. His restless mind searched for a solution, a way to escape the fate imposed by the gods' envy. Seizing this moment of emotional frailty, Hera decided to unleash her cruelest vengeance upon him. Hera sent Lysa, the goddess of madness, to visit Hercules and sow in his mind the insidious seed of insanity, clouding his judgment and filling his thoughts with terrifying visions. Hercules began to perceive dreadful monsters and savage beasts emerging from every direction, creatures that threatened him relentlessly and demanded a constant, desperate struggle. Unaware that these apparitions were nothing more than treacherous illusions, Hercules waged epic and brutally violent battles against foes that existed only in his mind. With his overwhelming strength, he tore down walls, smashed furniture, and confronted monstrous shadows with powerful strikes and furious roars that echoed through the night, terrifying everyone nearby. Each clash was marked by uncontrolled brutality, and the ferocity of Zeus's son seemed boundless as he fought enemies born solely of his tormented imagination. When that tragic delirium finally lifted and he regained consciousness, Hercules beheld a scene that tore his soul from his body. His own hands were drenched in blood, and at his feet lay the lifeless forms of those he loved most, his beloved children and his wife Megara, innocent victims of the devastating madness sent by the vengeful Hera. Upon fully grasping the magnitude of the horror he had wrought, Hercules felt a pain so deep and suffocating that his heart seemed about to burst. Consumed by guilt and despair, he chose to abandon Mycenae and embark on self-imposed exile, wandering through distant lands without any clear direction, tormented by the constant memory of the crimes he had committed against his own family. Racked by guilt and hopelessness, Hercules descended into a profound depression, perpetually haunted by the terrible recollections of what he had done to those he held dear. He felt utterly broken, questioning his right to live after inflicting such suffering on his loved ones. The crushing pain led him to doubt whether any future could exist for him. It was during this period of isolation and deep sorrow that Theseus, the famed Athenian hero, found Hercules in his state of utter desolation. Theseus, who had always held great admiration and respect for Zeus's son, extended his hand in solidarity, offering comfort and hope to his friend in his darkest hour. With Theseus's steady and generous support, Hercules gradually began to emerge from the emotional abyss in which he was trapped. At first, he resisted the solace offered by his friend, believing that no amount of compassion could ease his immense pain or the crushing guilt that weighed on his heart. But Theseus remained patient and steadfast, reminding Hercules of his virtues and past heroism, insisting that the man before him was still worthy of admiration and respect. Slowly, these words began to pierce the thick clouds of despair engulfing Hercules' mind, igniting within him an almost forgotten spark of hope. Though deep, his emotional wounds began to heal under his friend's patient care and empathetic understanding, allowing Hercules to tentatively believe once more in the possibility of redemption and a future in which he could reclaim part of what he had lost. Finally, with renewed determination fueled by Theseus's unwavering calming presence, Hercules resolved to return to Mycenae. Beside his faithful friend, he felt stronger and more prepared to embark on the arduous path of redemption. Knowing this journey would be long and difficult, he was determined to submit to King Eurystheus' orders, humiliating as they might be, willing to pay any price to relieve the crushing weight of his guilt and purify himself of the terrible sins still haunting his heart. With humility never before seen in someone of such power, Hercules presented himself before King Eurystheus, kneeling in front of him, his face etched with suffering and his eyes brimming with genuine tears. With a voice heavy with emotion and remorse, the hero begged for forgiveness, imploring for a chance to atone and cleanse himself of the terrible sins he had committed. Eurystheus, surprised and secretly pleased to see great Hercules submissive and vulnerable, agreed to grant him the opportunity for redemption, imposing upon him a series of labors impossible for any ordinary mortal to accomplish. Thus began the saga of Hercules' 12 labors, epic challenges that would be forever etched into history as the supreme example of strength, courage, and determination in the face of adversity. Even before he placed himself under King Eurystheus of Mycenae's command, Hercules had already won the hearts of the people through his unwavering courage and heroic deeds. Eurystheus, however, could not hide the bitterness and envy he felt as his cousin's renown spread. With each passing day, the king grew more anxious about his hold onto the throne. He regarded Hercules not only as a direct threat, but as a rival undeserving of the affection and esteem the people lavished upon him. These were honors Eurystheus himself had never managed to secure. Today we tend to associate lions exclusively with Africa, yet in antiquity, these majestic beasts also ranged across various parts of Europe. European lions stirred both dread and reverence among local communities. They often attacked livestock and humans, becoming central figures in countless, frightening tales and folklore passed down through the ages. Among them, the story of the famed Nemean lion. This very lion would become Hercules' first great ordeal at Eurystheus' behest. The king, eager to send Hercules far from Mycenae and secretly relying on his failure, charged him with slaying a monstrous lion that prowled the forests of Argolis. Not only did this creature prey on regional flocks, but it had also developed a gruesome appetite for human flesh after devouring several villagers. Legend had it that this fearsome beast was born of Typhon, a terrorizing giant whose form reached the skies, and Echidna, the dreaded mother of all evil creatures in mythology. From these dreadful parents, the lion inherited unparalleled savagery and an impenetrable hide, impervious to every weapon known to mortals. This made it virtually unbeatable and deepened the dread it inspired among those who lived nearby. The land of Nemea was fertile and prosperous, yet its fields lay under a perpetual shadow because of the lion's presence. Local folk lived in unending fear. They dared not venture out after dusk and remained ever watchful, worried that the beast might strike without warning. Crops were left untended, and many villagers had already fled in search of refuge elsewhere. When Hercules arrived, hope flickered anew. His presence brought relief and courage, and people once more dared to dream of a future free from the specter that had ruled them for so long. After tracking the lion's deep paw prints with great care, Hercules at last caught sight of the beast. The lion was truly immense. Its commanding form moved with an air of royalty that befitted the king of beasts. The creature was headed toward the dark, foreboding entrance of a cave it had claimed as its lair. Hercules studied its movements intently, fully aware that he was about to face an adversary whose dreadful reputation already stretched across Greece. Upon stepping into the cave, Hercules immediately encountered a stifling, oppressive atmosphere that smothered him. The dim interior reeked of putrid decay, a clear sign that the beast had inhabited that cavern for a long time. The floor was grotesquely strewn with animal skeletons and human remains alike, silent evidence of the violence and ferocity of the creature dwelling within. Hercules advanced with the utmost caution, attuned to the faintest sound. From the depths of darkness, he could plainly hear the deep, ominous breathing of the great feline, which grew steadily louder as he ventured further into the cavern, heightening the sense of an impending clash. Then, emerging from the cave's deepest shadows, the colossal lion appeared majestically atop a raised rock. Its vast silhouette was even more terrifying against the backdrop of scattered bones. Its eyes, bright with untamed ferocity, fixed on Hercules with an almost supernatural intensity. The creature opened its jaws, revealing enormous razor-sharp fangs, and unleashed a roar so mighty that the cave walls trembled. The sound echoed like thunder, powerful enough to freeze the soul of the bravest warrior. Hercules felt that monstrous vibration ripple through his body, yet the divine blood of Zeus, coursing through his veins, upheld his resolve. Drawing a deep breath, he swiftly knocked his bow and fired an arrow aimed squarely at the beast's head. However, to his astonishment and dismay, the arrow bounced off uselessly, confirming in a terrifying manner the beast's legendary invulnerability to mortal weapons. Driven by a primal and insatiable fury, the enormous lion lunged at Hercules with horrifying force, baring sharp claws and wide-open jaws in an expression of utter malice. Feeling the full weight of the pending attack, the hero raised his mighty club. Gathering all his courage and divine strength, he leapt into the air, determined to meet the lethal beast head-on and confront the nightmare charging toward him. Their violent collision culminated in a devastating blow delivered by Hercules, who struck the lion's head with such brutal force that it seemed capable of shattering stone. The impact resounded through the cave, and for a fleeting moment, the beast staggered, its massive head swaying in confusion, its stance faltering. Yet to Hercules' shock, not a single wound was visible. Not even the faintest mark marred the beast's impervious hide. Regaining its menacing posture in an instant, the massive creature turned back toward its opponent with renewed ferocity and resolve, ready to prolong the deadly struggle. In retaliation, the lion surged at Hercules with multiplied fury, striking with untamed savagery. Realizing at once that his weapons were futile against the beast's impenetrable hide, Hercules discarded them. Driven by courage beyond mortal measures, he charged into a direct, hand-to-hand confrontation. The encounter became a terrifying display of raw strength and unwavering resolve. In that dramatic and desperate struggle, the creature's razor-sharp claws tore into the hero's flesh, leaving wounds that burned like searing fire. Each attack tested Hercules' endurance as he fought with every ounce of his being to keep those powerful jaws from closing around him. The pain was excruciating, yet the demigod's indomitable will held firm, enabling him to withstand the ferocity of the onslaught with superhuman bravery. With a cunning worthy of his divine lineage, Hercules realized he need not breach the animal's invulnerable hide to prevail. Ignoring the agonizing lacerations inflicted by the creature's claws, he summoned every shred of his strength and locked his muscular arms around the lion's thick neck. Hercules then squeezed with all his might, initiating a brutal and relentless strangling grip. The beast thrashed wildly in response, but Hercules held on, drawing upon every reserve of his divine power, until at last he subdued the fearsome and dreaded lion. After an arduous and dramatic struggle, the gigantic lion finally yielded to Hercules' extraordinary strength. In a final moment, the beast's body went still. Nemea's terror lay dead at last. Aware of the need to prove this epic feat, Hercules once more displayed his resourcefulness. He used the lion's own sharp claws to carefully peel away the creature's impenetrable pelt. Donning the tough hide as a cloak, he carried irrefutable evidence of his valor and unquestionable victory over the dreadful creature that had spread terror throughout the region. When he returned triumphantly to Mycenae, draped in the Nemean lion's majestic skin as a banner of conquest, the populace erupted in awe and celebration. The citizens of Mycenae thronged the streets, overcome with pride and admiration for the hero who had liberated their lands from the terrifying beast. His name rang out in fervent acclaim through every square and alley. Yet within the royal palace, King Eurystheus watched the spectacle with deep and growing dread. Seeing Hercules approach in that imposing guise, wearing the skin of the beast he had deemed undefeatable, Eurystheus was seized by irrational terror. Overcome by fear that his cousin might now turn against him and claim the throne he occupied by unjust favor, the cowardly king fled in desperation and hid inside a great bronze jar, trembling and cowering before the overwhelming power and unmatched bravery shown by Zeus's son. Thus, with absolute success, Hercules completed the first of his legendary labors. This triumph marked the beginning of an epic journey that would lead him to even greater dangers, forever etching his name in history and securing his place among the greatest heroes the world has ever known. After successfully completing his first labor, Hercules returned to Mycenae, but he was given no rest. King Eurystheus, driven by envy and insecurity, immediately imposed a second, even more difficult challenge. This time, Hercules was to confront and destroy a terrifying creature known as the Hydra, a monster that terrorized the region of Lerna. According to legend, the Hydra was the offspring of the dreadful Typhon, whose monstrous forms even the gods struggled against, and the cruel Echidna, the mother of all monsters. Its presence had turned life in the region into a continuous nightmare. The creature's reputation was so sinister that few dared to even speak its name without trembling. Hercules was not alone in this perilous task. His loyal nephew, Iolaus, his inseparable companion since youth, accompanied him. They shared a strong bond of friendship and trust, essential for facing the challenges ahead. During their journey to Lerna, the two heroes passed through a village ravaged by the monster. Burned down houses, destroyed crops, and an eerie silence were testament to the creature's ferocity. They encountered a traumatized survivor who, with wide eyes and a trembling voice, told them a chilling story of the Hydra's attack. The old man described how the creature's many serpentine heads emerged from the darkness of night, destroying everything in their path. He recounted the horror of seeing friends and family mercilessly dragged away and devoured before the terrified eyes of the villagers. His words were interrupted by sobs and uncontrollable trembling, and with shaking hands, he pointed them toward the Hydra's lair, deep within the dark swamps of Lerna. The swamp was a gloomy and oppressive place, shrouded in thick mists and a foul atmosphere. Hercules and Iolaus advanced with difficulty, facing deep mud, dense vegetation, and treacherous creatures lurking in the shadows. Every step demanded great effort and determination, testing not only their physical strength, but also their courage and emotional resilience. After a grueling trek through the swamp, Hercules and Iolaus finally spotted the cave where the Hydra rested. A frightening darkness and nauseating stench emanated from the entrance, confirming they were in the right place. To draw the creature out of its lair, Hercules decided to use flaming arrows. He shot them into the cave, provoking flames that briefly lit the shadowy interior. In response to the invading flames, a deafening roar echoed through the swamp, rattling the courage of even the bravest warriors. The Hydra emerged from its lair, furious and monstrous. The Hydra slowly emerged from its cave, revealing its full, terrifying monstrosity. First came the serpentine heads, countless and sinuous, each equipped with razor-sharp fangs and eyes burning like infernal embers. Its massive body was covered in dark, slimy scales that seemed to hiss like 1,000 snakes slithering over rough stone. Each head emitted a deafening roar, creating a horrifying chorus that pierced the ears and rattled even the steeliest nerves. Despite the creature's colossal size, it moved with surprising speed, launching fierce, synchronized attacks with its many heads. Each one struck with terrifying swiftness, trying to trap Hercules in its deadly jaws. But the hero showed exceptional reflexes, leaping nimbly and dodging the voracious attacks with precision. With a powerful and precise blow, Hercules brutally smashed one of the Hydra's monstrous heads with his heavy club. The impact was so great that the sound echoed across the dark swamp, and for a moment, the hero believed he had dealt a crippling blow to the beast. However, to his astonishment, he watched in disbelief as two new serpentine heads sprouted from the wounded neck, growing rapidly in grotesque, twitching movements. The heads, dripping with dark, viscous fluid, thrashed violently as they formed, making the monster an even greater threat. Fueled by growing fury and the desperate urgency to defeat the monster, Hercules unsheathed his sword and began striking the Hydra's heads with swift and vigorous blows. One by one, the heads were cut off and fell to the ground with a repulsive thud, splattering the area with dark, viscous fluid. However, immersed in his rage and focused on the battle, Hercules didn't immediately notice that instead of weakening the creature, he was making it even more powerful. Each severed head regenerated with terrifying speed, multiplying and intensifying the monster's attacks, creating a nightmarish scene of chaos. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Iolaus shouted desperately to his uncle, trying to snap him out of it. "Hercules, stop! You're only making it worse!" The more heads Hercules cut, the harder and more dangerous the situation became. Iolaus watched in horror as new heads rapidly sprouted, multiplying and amplifying the deadly threat looming over them. Amid the growing chaos and mounting despair, Iolaus observed the creature carefully, trying to understand the cause of the rapid head regeneration. Suddenly, a clever idea sparked in his mind. "Uncle, we need to cauterize the wounds where the heads were cut. Fire might stop them from growing back." Iolaus quickly grabbed a burning torch, preparing to put into action the strategy that could change the course of the battle and end the nightmare. Thus, while Hercules skillfully cut off each head with swift and precise blows, Iolaus immediately followed behind, pressing the burning torch against the open wounds. Thick spirals of smoke rose into the air, and the pungent stench of scorched flesh filled the swamp. It was a coordinated and meticulous effort that demanded absolute courage and precision. Any small mistake could result in new heads and even greater danger. Gradually, they managed to weaken the creature's devastating power. Enraged by yet another likely victory for Hercules, the goddess Hera, driven by her usual wrath and growing bitterness over the hero's ongoing successes, decided to personally interfere in the battle. With a gesture filled with divine resentment, she summoned from the swamp's murky depths a legion of enormous crabs to aid the Hydra. These crabs emerged from the fetid waters with menacing movements, their bodies covered in tough shells and claws as sharp as knives. They advanced to attack and distract the heroes, a desperate attempt by the goddess to finally defeat Hercules. The crabs attacked the two heroes frenetically, trying to distract and disrupt their movements. Hercules, however, once again demonstrated his immense strength. Even under the combined and relentless assault of the creatures, he fought with incredible skill, crushing the crabs' sturdy shells underfoot, while still contending with the Hydra. The crabs were quickly defeated, reduced to scattered fragments across the swamp, making it clear once more that nothing could stop the legendary hero. At last, after a long and exhausting battle, Hercules and Iolaus had destroyed all of the Hydra's heads, except for the last one. Even after being severed, it remained alive, growling and snapping. Hercules seized this final head and hurled it into a deep pit, covering it with a massive stone to ensure it would never rise again. Recognizing the strategic value of the Hydra's poisonous blood, Hercules decided to dip his arrows in the creature's toxic ichor, thus gaining a new and deadly weapon for future challenges. Although defeated, Hera honored the efforts of her minions by sending the crabs to the heavens, transforming them into the constellation Cancer, and immortalizing them among the stars. Thus, with another epic victory, Hercules took another decisive step on his path to eternal glory. After defeating the relentless Nemean lion and the monstrous Hydra of Lerna, Hercules had firmly established his reputation as the greatest and most admired hero of his time. His fame had spread far beyond the borders of Mycenae, reaching distant cities and villages where people told increasingly fantastic tales of his immense strength and unmatched bravery. With each victory, the demigod's legend grew, and he was no longer seen as a mere mortal, but as one chosen by the gods, destined for greatness and immortality through his heroic deeds. Hercules' growing popularity deeply unsettled his cousin, the insecure King Eurystheus, who saw in the hero not only an imminent threat to the throne he held with increasing difficulty, but also a formidable rival in the people's eyes. While Eurystheus was viewed with suspicion and disdain, Hercules was hailed as a true protector and a symbol of hope. Determined to put an end to the hero he so feared, Eurystheus devised a cunning plan. He assigned Hercules two seemingly impossible tasks: to capture alive two legendary animals, the elusive Ceryneian hind and the fearsome Erymanthian boar. King Eurystheus was absolutely convinced that Hercules would never return without having fully completed the missions given to him, given the hero's pride and determination. Still, by assigning two such unlikely and dangerous tasks, Eurystheus took perverse satisfaction in imagining that he would finally witness his powerful cousin's downfall. He clearly pictured Hercules either lost in an endless pursuit of the mystical hind or falling to the ferocity of the boar, thus ending once and for all the reign of fear and insecurity that haunted him. The first challenge was to capture the Ceryneian hind, an extraordinary creature shrouded in legends and mystery. Its appearance was splendid and majestic. It was distinguished by magnificent antlers made of pure gold that gleamed brightly in the sunlight, and hooves as hard as iron, capable of crossing hostile terrain without wearing down. The animal possessed unmatched elegance and moved with almost divine grace, so swift and elusive that no hunter had ever managed to get near it, making Hercules' mission even more daunting and legendary. This hind had been raised by the goddess Artemis herself and was considered one of the most sacred and special creatures in all of Greek mythology. It was part of a select group of 5 divine hinds. These hinds were responsible for pulling Artemis's golden chariot during her celestial travels, symbolizing purity and agility. However, unlike the other 4 under the direct command of the goddess, the Ceryneian hind had the privilege of roaming freely through forests and wild fields, revered as a living symbol of freedom and independence. Hercules set out determined, but quickly realized the challenge was far greater than he had anticipated. The creature was incredibly skittish, with heightened senses and supernatural speed, making it nearly impossible to approach undetected. For over an entire year, Hercules pursued it relentlessly through dense forests, where sunlight barely pierced through and paths were difficult and full of obstacles. He climbed steep mountains, braving cutting winds and slippery cliffs that demanded extreme focus and physical endurance. Each failed attempt to capture the hind grew his anxiety, giving him the sinking feeling that, for the first time, he might be up against a truly insurmountable challenge. Finally, after an entire year of relentless pursuit and countless moments of frustration, Hercules was at last able to get close to the hind. In absolute silence, he patiently followed its delicate steps, watching every movement with care. When the opportunity finally presented itself, he drew his bow with extreme precision and shot an arrow which struck one of the creature's hind legs. Wounded, the hind stumbled briefly, struggling to maintain its impressive speed, but its extraordinary swiftness had been compromised. Hercules moved quickly, seizing the animal's moment of weakness. With firm and decisive movements, he finally managed to capture the magnificent creature, with a deep respect for the majesty and courage it had shown. But at that very moment, a divine light illuminated the surrounding forest, revealing the imposing and majestic presence of the goddess Artemis. Her gaze was full of indignation and restrained fury, and a divine aura surrounded her like an invisible flame. Her voice echoed powerfully among the trees as she sternly questioned Hercules, demanding to know why he had dared commit such a disrespectful act against a creature under her direct protection. Hercules, showing absolute respect and humility before the goddess, bowed to Artemis as he carefully explained his mission. He emphasized that he was not acting out of personal ambition or desire, but was carrying out a sacred command issued by the Oracle of Delphi, an order he could neither refuse nor fail to complete. With sincerity in his voice, Hercules solemnly promised the goddess that the sacred animal would suffer no lasting harm and would be released immediately after fulfilling King Eurystheus' requirement. In doing so, he hoped to calm the divine indignation of the powerful Artemis. The goddess, moved by the sincerity and humility Hercules displayed, softened her severe expression and pondered in deep silence for a few moments. Recognizing that the hero bore no ill intent and was acting under the king's orders in obedience to the oracle's divine will, Artemis reluctantly granted her consent. With a majestic gesture and a firm gaze, she warned Hercules of the importance of keeping his promise, reminding him of the grave consequences he would face if he failed. At last, she allowed the hero to proceed with his mission, though she kept a watchful eye on him. Hercules immediately set out to complete his second task, to capture the dreaded Erymanthian boar. The creature was known and feared throughout the region, described in local legends as a being of relentless ferocity and overwhelming strength. Nearby villages lived in terror, fields were destroyed, and the residents were constantly threatened by the furious beast. Horrifying testimonies recounted how the boar charged mercilessly at anything and everyone in its path, leaving behind only destruction and fear. Capturing such a creature alive seemed impossible. To overcome this challenge, Hercules relied not only on his impressive physical strength, but also on remarkable intelligence and strategic skill. Knowing he could not kill the animal, the hero carefully devised a plan to defeat it through exhaustion. He understood that the boar possessed formidable endurance, but also knew its natural limits. With calculated patience and great cunning, Hercules began to drive the creature across steep and treacherous terrain, gradually pushing it to the edge of its stamina. Hercules pursued the boar with tireless skill, cleverly leading it along a winding route that climbed ever higher into the Erymanthian mountains, where snow piled up deep, forming thick, perilous layers. Every step demanded enormous physical effort and constant focus from the hero to avoid slipping or falling on the icy slopes. The powerful boar, in its wild rage, charged forward with determination, but it soon began to feel the effects of the deep, cold snow, which restricted its movement and quickly drained its strength. The chase seemed endless, and Hercules felt the weight of exhaustion and the biting cold, testing his own physical and mental limits. Finally, after a desperate and grueling effort to keep going, the boar collapsed, completely overcome, and surrendered in the thick snow. Hercules tightly bound the defeated creature and triumphantly carried it on his shoulders back to Mycenae. The return journey was exhausting, but the hero felt incomparable satisfaction at overcoming yet another impossible challenge. Upon reaching the gates of the royal palace, the enormous boar caused shock and astonishment in all who witnessed its arrival. Eurystheus, seeing the beast he believed impossible to capture alive, fell into a state of panic and ran in terror to hide inside his now famous bronze jar. His cowardly reaction drew laughter and amusement from the townspeople, who once again hailed Hercules as their great protector and invincible hero. Thus another epic labor was completed, further strengthening the immortal legacy of the greatest hero Greece had ever known. King Eurystheus of Mycenae, tormented by growing envy and deep frustration, watched in despair as Hercules' unstoppable rise continued. Each labor, originally conceived to be an insurmountable trial, only served to further polish the hero's glory, making him more beloved and celebrated with each success. Desperate to tarnish the son of Zeus's reputation, and perhaps even end his life, Eurystheus devised a new and infamous challenge. Thus, the king imposed on Hercules a labor he believed would be the ultimate humiliation. A task so degrading and vile, it would be unworthy even of the lowliest mortal, let alone a demigod with Zeus's blood in his veins. The hero was to clean, in a single day, the legendary stables of King Aegeus, located in the kingdom of Elis. These were no ordinary stables. They were an absolute abomination, a monument to utter negligence. For decades, the dung of thousands of cattle had piled up, forming mountains of foul waste that stretched across vast areas, spreading a stench that fouled the entire region. The task seemed not only impossible, but utterly repulsive. Eurystheus, in his pettiness, believed that beyond the difficulty of the task, Hercules, driven by his divine pride, would flatly refuse to perform such a degrading job. He hoped the hero's refusal would lead to his downfall. Contrary to the tyrant's expectations, the hero, with a humility that contrasted sharply with his colossal strength, bowed to his king's will and immediately set out for the kingdom of Aegeus. To Hercules, the need to purify himself of his past sins, imposed upon him by Hera's madness, was far more important than any personal pride or superficial dignity stemming from his divine lineage. Upon arriving in Elis, Hercules presented himself before King Aegeus, a man known for his immense wealth and vast herds, and offered his services to clean the stables. Cunningly, he omitted the fact that he was there at King Eurystheus's command, keeping the true purpose of his work a secret. The son of Zeus, ever shrewd, negotiated payment for the job. Aegeus, thinking Hercules underestimated the magnitude of the task, believed he was getting an excellent deal. The king, convinced that cleaning the stables in a single day was absolutely impossible, promised to give the hero a tenth of his immense herd as a reward. He was certain Hercules would fail, and therefore receive nothing. As a formality, the king called upon his own son, Phyleus, to witness the agreement, sealing the promise with a solemn oath. A shovel was handed to Hercules, an ironic symbol of the manual labor expected of him. But the hero, with a glint of cunning in his eye, set it aside. He would not rely on brute strength in the conventional way for this task. Instead, he headed straight for the nearby Alpheus and Peneus rivers. Using his extraordinary strength, Hercules began hurling massive rocks and digging deep channels in the earth, diverting the course of the rivers. With surprising ingenuity, he redirected the powerful currents of water toward Aegeus's stables. The surging waters, now transformed into purifying torrents, burst through the stable's gates with overwhelming force, sweeping away decades of accumulated filth. In just a few hours, the power of nature, guided by Hercules' intelligence, accomplished what had seemed impossible, leaving the stables impeccably clean. After the miraculous cleanup, Hercules, with the same mastery, allowed the rivers to return to their natural courses, restoring the landscape. King Aegeus, upon seeing his stables sparkling clean, and realizing that Hercules hadn't even dirtied his hands, was completely dumbfounded, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the feat. When Hercules demanded his rightful payment, the king, overcome by greed and ashamed at being outdone, cynically declared that he had never made such a promise. However, Phyleus, his own son, a man of honor, stepped in and confirmed the agreement he had witnessed. Enraged by such betrayal and public humiliation, King Aegeus, in a fit of fury, banished both Hercules and his own son, Phyleus, from the kingdom. But Hercules, the hero who had endured humiliation in pursuit of purification, would not accept such an affront to his honor and to justice. He gathered an army of loyal Theban allies and returned to Elis. In a swift and decisive campaign, Hercules dethroned King Aegeus, who had broken his word, and placed the honorable Prince Phyleus on his father's throne, restoring justice and order. And so, another labor was completed, proving that intelligence and justice were just as powerful as brute strength. After cleaning the stables of Aegeus, Hercules was assigned a new and terrifying labor: to go to Arcadia and rid the region of the Stymphalian birds, giant, monstrous raptors that terrorize the lands around Lake Stymphalus. After a long and exhausting journey, the hero finally reached the lake's edge. To his shock and concern, the number of birds was overwhelming, darkening the sky and trees like a massive cloud of danger. These dreadful birds had iron beaks and feathers capable of piercing armor and tearing victims apart. They attacked their prey not only with talons and beaks, but also by launching their razor-sharp metal feathers like darts, spreading destruction and panic wherever they flew. It seemed impossible to face such a threat through brute strength alone. The sheer number and nature of the birds made a direct assault ineffective. So Hercules realized he would need to solve this challenge through cunning and intelligence. At this crucial moment, help came from his sister, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. She understood the need for a different approach and offered divine intervention. The goddess gifted Hercules a musical instrument of iron, a pair of crotala, clappers, crafted by the god Hephaestus in his sacred forge. Using these divine clappers, Hercules climbed a mountain near the lake and struck them with all his might, creating a deafening noise, a metallic clamoring that echoed throughout the valley. The sound was so loud and disorienting that the birds, terrified and confused, took off in a massive panic. As the birds scattered through the sky, Hercules seized the opportunity. With his bow and arrows, whose tips had been dipped in the deadly venom of the Hydra's blood, he shot down several of the creatures mid-flight, ensuring the threat was significantly reduced. Another labor had been completed, and now the hero set course for the island of Crete, where King Eurystheus had ordered Hercules to capture and tame the fearsome Cretan bull. This was no ordinary bull. It was a creature of unparalleled beauty and majesty, sent by Poseidon to King Minos to be sacrificed in the god's honor. However, due to the bull's exceptional qualities, Minos, in an act of disrespect, chose not to sacrifice it and kept it for himself. As punishment for this slight, Poseidon, the god of the seas, made the bull go mad with uncontrollable rage, turning it into a wild and destructive beast that terrorized the land. The fearless hero would soon come face to face with this mighty bull, who was also the father of the fearsome Minotaur, the mythical creature that dwelled within the labyrinth of Crete. The bull was incredibly strong, with powerful muscles and sharp horns, and engaged the hero in a titanic struggle. The ground trembled beneath their hooves as they fought, each testing the other's limits. But the bovine beast, for all its rage and power, wasn't strong enough to overcome the son of Zeus. Hercules, with his legendary strength and flawless technique, grabbed it by the horns and, with monumental effort, threw it to the ground, subduing it. After tying the creature securely, Hercules placed the bull on a ship bound for the Peloponnese, a long and dangerous journey with the beast on board. Upon arriving in Mycenae, the bull was presented to Eurystheus, who, after confirming the task had been completed, ordered the animal released, fearing to keep such a beast in his kingdom. Now free, the bull would roam the lands of Greece, spreading terror wherever it went, an untamed force of nature. But it was on the plains of Marathon that it would meet its next formidable opponent. His name was Theseus, and destiny had another legendary encounter in store for the creature. Hercules had barely completed the demanding labor of taming the Cretan bull when a new and even more grotesque task was imposed by the ever-jealous and fearful King Eurystheus of Mycenae. This time, the mission would take him to a distant and barbaric land, with the order to return bringing the terrifying and infamous man-eating mares of Diomedes. Hercules' destination was Thrace, a region north of Greece, known for its wild tribes and brutal customs. There reigned Diomedes, a savage and inhumane tyrant, son of Ares, the god of war himself. That divine lineage seems to have imbued Diomedes with an innate ferocity and bloodlust, making him the cruelest among the Thracians. His rule over his subjects, the Bistones, a people as wild as their king, was marked by absolute tyranny and blatant contempt for all laws of hospitality, which were sacred in ancient Greece. Diomedes' kingdom was a place of fear and despair for any traveler. His most heinous practice, and the source of his macabre reputation, was to ambush and cruelly capture any foreigner who dared set foot on his land. These unfortunate prisoners were not kept in ordinary cells. They were dragged to the royal stable, a stage of unspeakable horrors. There, chained by massive iron shackles forged to contain their power and uncontrollable ferocity, lived the powerful mares of Diomedes. They were no mere horses. They were true monsters. Their coats were coarse and dark. Their eyes burned with insatiable hunger. And their teeth were unnaturally large and sharp, suited for a diet far beyond anything natural. Long ago, these beasts had abandoned any taste for oats or grain, developing a terrifying and unnatural craving for human flesh. Legend held that their twisted appetite was a reflection of their master's own sadism. With barbarity that shocked even the most savage, Diomedes personally threw captured visitors, defenseless and terrified, into the stables to be devoured by his terrible equines. The victims' screams echoed through the stables, a soundtrack of horror for the king and a feast for his beasts, who devoured them mercilessly, leaving only bleached bones and the foul stench of blood and fear. It was a cycle of horror that Hercules was destined to break. For the perilous and arduous journey to far-off Thrace, Hercules did not travel alone. He was accompanied by a few loyal friends and allies, men of valor and courage. Among them was his brave nephew Iolaus, a seasoned and clever warrior who had served as Hercules' charioteer and companion in many previous labors, known for his unwavering loyalty and sharp mind. Also joining them was Abderus, a young and promising warrior of divine lineage, son of Hermes himself. Abderus was fast, agile, and possessed the boldness of youth. Together, they would face the dangers of the road and the cruelty of King Diomedes. Upon reaching the outskirts of Diomedes' realm, Hercules and his companions quickly learned of the unspeakable atrocities committed by the king. Stories of disappearing travelers and whispered tales of the man-eating mares swiftly reached the hero's ears. The violation of Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality, a divine command imposed by Zeus himself, was a grave affront to the cosmic order and to human decency. For Hercules, as Zeus's son, such a transgression was not only a crime, but a direct challenge to his father's authority and to the moral principles he, however imperfectly, sought to uphold. As Hercules and his group approached, King Diomedes, alerted to the arrival of new visitors, wasted no time. With his personal guard of Bistonian warriors, just as savage as their leader, Diomedes set out with the sadistic intent to offer new victims to his hungry mares. Confident in their numerical advantage and infamous reputation, the king and his guards attacked Hercules and his companions. But what they expected to be an easy capture turned into a massacre for the Thracians. Hercules, with his legendary strength and unmatched combat skill, dismantled the royal guard with striking ease. His blows fell like thunder, his club cleared a path through the enemies, and his mere presence radiated the aura of invincible power. Diomedes' soldiers, used to terrorizing peasants and defenseless travelers, were no match for the divine fury of a demigod. In mere moments, Diomedes' guard lay shattered, their bodies strewn across the battlefield. King Diomedes, watching his men fall with growing dread, attempted to flee, realizing he had gravely underestimated his guests. But Hercules, driven by a strong sense of justice and deep disgust for the king's heinous crimes, would not allow him to escape unpunished. The breaking of divine law, the cruelty toward innocents, and the desecration of hospitality cried out for retribution. In an act of poetic vengeance that would echo through the ages, Hercules seized the cruel Diomedes. The tyrant, who had fed others to his beasts, would now face the same fate. Without hesitation, the hero cast him to be devoured by his own mares. It was a terrible but just end for a king who had forgotten his own humanity. The mares, ravenous, tore into their former master, a gruesome feast that served as the darkest form of justice. With Diomedes dead, and the mares temporarily sated by their grotesque meal, the creatures were visibly calmer and more manageable. Hercules, with his mastery and fearless audacity, seized the moment to tame them. He managed to place them under reins, and with some difficulty, but no longer facing their initial savagery, led them to his ship, preparing for the journey back to Mycenae. However, peace did not last long. News of Diomedes' death and the defeat of his guards spread quickly, and more Thracian soldiers, angry and vengeful over their king's fall, gathered from all directions, forming a new and even greater force. Realizing the imminent danger of another massive battle, Hercules acted swiftly. He asked Abderus to hold the mares and keep them under control, while he and Iolaus launched themselves into combat against the new attackers. Abderus, proud of the hero's trust, accepted the task without hesitation, gripping the reins with all his strength. The battle was fierce, but the Thracian warriors again proved no match for the overwhelming power of Hercules and the clever tactics of Iolaus. The demigod and his nephew fought with the ferocity of lions, scattering and defeating the enemy, just as they had in previous confrontations. But when Hercules returned to the mares, after the dust of battle had settled, he was met with a tragic and chilling scene that froze his heart. Abderus was dead. The young and promising warrior lay lifeless, and the mares, having reverted to their savage man-eating nature in the absence of Hercules' dominating presence, had feasted on him. Though recently fed with Diomedes' flesh, their primitive instincts and defining ferocity had prevailed. The loss of Abderus was a heavy blow to Hercules. He bitterly mourned the death of his young and loyal friend, burdened by the guilt of having left him alone with the beasts. In a gesture of profound grief and eternal tribute, Hercules buried Abderus with full honors as a warrior and declared that a new city would be founded at the site of his tomb, Abdera. This city would stand as a living monument to the young hero's sacrifice and to the friendship that had bound him to Hercules. With the mares once again under control and the weight of Abderus' death in his heart, Hercules loaded the creatures onto his ship and began the long, perilous journey back to Mycenae. After Hercules presented the mares of Diomedes at King Eurystheus' court, the beasts were placed in a sacred enclosure, under the protection of Hera. But the bloodline of these peculiar equines did not end there. Legend has it that these legendary animals gave rise to a lineage of extraordinary horses, renowned for their speed, strength, and untamable spirit. These horses were unlike any others, possessing a vitality and stamina that reflected their savage origin. It is believed that Bucephalus, the legendary horse of Alexander the Great, bore the blood of these mares in his veins. Bucephalus was known for his strength, his wild temperament, and his loyalty only to Alexander, traits that seemed to mirror the savagery and grandeur of his ancestors. And under the command of Alexander the Great, the indomitable Bucephalus would go on to conquer nearly the entire known world. For his 9th labor, Hercules, aware of the formidable reputation of his next destination, gathered a select group of brave and loyal heroes willing to accompany him on a dangerous journey to Themyscira, the legendary realm of the Amazons. This mission would test not only his strength, but also his diplomacy and insight. The origin of this unusual labor lay in the vanity of King Eurystheus' daughter, the spoiled and demanding Admete, enchanted by the stories circulating about the bravery and treasures of the Amazons. She demanded that her father give her Hippolyta's belt as a personal gift. For Admete, owning such a coveted item would be the ultimate proof of her status. Hippolyta was no ordinary queen. She was the undisputed ruler of the Amazons, a people of fearless and independent warrior women. Her reputation on the battlefield was legendary, and she was revered for her unmatched skill and courage. In recognition of her deeds and mastery in combat, Hippolyta had been given an honorary gift by none other than Ares, the god of war, a magnificent belt made of gold and precious gems. More than just a decoration, it was a symbol of her leadership, her power, and the divine favor over her warrior people. To fulfill his daughter's whim, and as yet another attempt to impose an insurmountable challenge, King Eurystheus sent Hercules to bring back the belt using whatever means necessary. This vague instruction gave Hercules both the freedom and the burden to choose between diplomacy or war. Themyscira was a unique kingdom, a bastion of female power. It was inhabited and ruled exclusively by women, who had built a society where strength, military skill, and independence were the foundation of their existence. They were famous for being exceptional fighters, trained from an early age in the arts of war, master horsewomen and archers, and their martial discipline earned them both the respect and fear of all neighboring nations. The idea of invading such a kingdom to steal a divine gift seemed like a suicide mission. As he neared the borders of the Amazon realm, Hercules, known not only for his brute strength, but also for his notable wisdom, chose diplomacy. Instead of launching a hostile assault, he and his companions sent messengers to the queen, requesting an audience. To the surprise of even some of his own warriors, who expected an immediate confrontation, Hercules was received by Queen Hippolyta herself. She, in turn, was genuinely impressed by the hero's powerful presence and commanding aura. His reputation had preceded him. Hercules, fully aware of the importance of avoiding unnecessary bloodshed, spoke diplomatically with the queen, expressing his request with respect and clarity. Hippolyta, for her part, responded with courtesy, moved by the hero's nobility and honesty. The negotiations were progressing surprisingly peacefully. They seemed to be reaching an amicable agreement, and Hippolyta, perhaps inspired by admiration for Hercules or by a desire to prevent a war that would cost her warriors' lives, was prepared to hand over the belt without the need for conflict. However, Hera, the relentless arch-enemy of Hercules, would not allow him to complete this task so easily, and certainly not through peace. Watching from her throne on Olympus, the unexpected harmony between the hero and the queen, divine fury burned within her. Taking the form of an Amazon, Hera descended from Olympus and, with malicious cunning, infiltrated Hippolyta's ranks. There, she began to insidiously spread a dangerous rumor. She claimed Hercules had not come in peace, but with a treacherous plan to kidnap the queen, enslave all the Amazons, and plunder their kingdom. Her lies, convincing and strategic, quickly ignited the proud and protective spirit of the warriors. The rumor spread like wildfire among the Amazons. Outraged by the alleged betrayal and fearful for their beloved queen, they did not hesitate. To protect Hippolyta and their homeland, the Amazons, furious and resolute, armed themselves en masse and attacked Hercules and his companions with overwhelming fury. The battle that followed was brutal and relentless. Arrows rained down, spears clashed against shields, and war cries echoed across the plains. Hercules and his warriors fought bravely against waves of enraged warriors, but the intensity of the assault was staggering. Many Amazons fell in battle, sacrificing their lives in loyalty to their queen and their nation, victims of divine deception. Amid the chaos and savagery of battles, among the Amazons who fell was Queen Hippolyta herself. Whether she died by Hercules' hands in self-defense, by the hand of one of his companions in the heat of combat, or, as some versions suggest, by Hera's own hand to ensure Hercules would bear the blame, remains a mystery. What is certain is that, after the battle, Hercules took her belt and began the journey back to Mycenae with his men, exhausted but victorious, though haunted by the bitter taste of a victory stained by unnecessary bloodshed. On their journey home, while sailing across the Aegean Sea, Hercules and his companions passed by Troy, the mighty walled city. As they approached the coast, they noticed the city in terrible distress, surrounded by an atmosphere of despair and calamity. King Laomedon of Troy was being punished for his impiety. Years earlier, he had refused to pay the promised tribute to the gods Poseidon and Apollo, who had built for him the legendary impregnable walls of Troy. In retaliation for this betrayal, Poseidon had sent a dreadful sea monster to ravage the Trojan coast, devouring people and animals and devastating the land. The only way to appease Poseidon's wrath was through a human sacrifice, and so the king's beautiful daughter, Princess Hesione, had been chosen to be offered to the beast at an altar by the sea. Upon witnessing the city's anguish and the injustice of the situation, Hercules, whose heart could not abide tyranny or injustice, offered his help. King Laomedon, desperate and out of options, promised a generous reward to the hero if he would save his daughter from the sea monster's jaws. Thus, without hesitation, Hercules set out to face the creature. Armed with his club and his legendary strength, he engaged the monster in battle. Colossal and terrifying as it was, the beast was no match for the mighty son of Zeus. Hercules leapt upon the creature and, in a spectacular fight, struck it with his club. And so the sea monster was mercilessly slain, freeing Troy from its dreadful torment. Victorious and unscathed, Hercules returned Princess Hesione safely to Laomedon, who was overjoyed to have his daughter back and his city free from the sea beast's threat. The people of Troy hailed Hercules as their savior. However, King Laomedon's happiness was short-lived, and his treacherous nature soon returned. In an act of dishonor and ingratitude, Laomedon lived up to his reputation as a cheat and refused to pay the promised reward to the hero. He despicably argued that Hercules' help hadn't been worth so much after all. Furious at this insult to his honor and generosity, Hercules was forced to stand down. From atop Troy's towering walls, hundreds of Trojan archers, loyal to their dishonorable king, aimed at Hercules and his men, awaiting Laomedon's command to fire. Hercules was not prepared to face an entire city's army alone. Faced with such overwhelming danger, Hercules and his companions were forced to retreat, driven away from the Trojan coast, humiliated by betrayal and threat. With Queen Hippolyta's belt in his possession, Hercules returned to Mycenae to deliver it to his king's daughter, thus completing his 9th labor. However, the betrayal he suffered at the hands of the Trojans, The broken promise and Laomedon's ingratitude left a stain on his honor that the hero would never forget. That memory of treachery would plant the seeds for a future and devastating revenge against the city of Troy. King Eurystheus, in his relentless pursuit of a task that would finally lead to Hercules' downfall, or at least keep him as far from Mycenae as possible, devised the 10th labor. This time, the mission was unprecedented in its boldness, a challenge that would test not only the hero's strength but also his endurance, intelligence, and ability to surpass the boundaries of the known world. Hercules was ordered to steal the cattle from the fearsome giant Geryon, a monstrous being who lived on a mythical island at the far reaches of the west. Geryon lived on the remote and enigmatic island of Erythea, a place said to lie beyond where any man had ever dared to go, a land bathed by the waters of Atlas. The journey there was a terrifying scale, a veritable odyssey across uncharted seas. Erythea was a point on the mythological map where the known world dissolved into mystery, where the sun set, and where sea monsters and legends were said to be real. With unshakable determination, Hercules sailed for what seemed like an eternity, braving storms, treacherous currents, and the crushing solitude of the open sea. His voyage led him beyond the limits of Greek cartography, until he finally reached an imposing mountain range that rose majestically, separating the familiar waters of the Mediterranean from the vast, uncharted expanses of the Atlantic Ocean. This natural barrier, known as Mount Calpe and Mount Abila, seemed impassable, a rocky wall marking the end of the world. But not even a colossal mountain stretching to the sky and plunging into the depths of the ocean could stop the son of Zeus. With the conviction that only demigods possess, Hercules decided that if he could not go around the obstacle, he would move it. He used his divine strength, the same that had once diverted rivers, to split the mountain in two. With a titanic effort, he pulled the two sides apart, creating a monumental, navigable passage. Thus, in a feat of divine engineering and brute strength, the hero connected the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, opening a gateway that would allow future generations of sailors to explore the oceans. The two great peaks, now separated by a strait, would forever be known as the Pillars of Hercules, an eternal testament to his might. Today, this place is recognized as the Strait of Gibraltar, a geographical landmark that still echoes the hero's legend. With the passage open, Hercules resumed his journey, venturing into the unknown waters of the ocean in search of Geryon's island. After days and nights of navigation across the ocean's waters, Hercules finally reached the mythical and isolated island of Erythea. It was a place of wild beauty, cloaked in an aura of dread, for it was the home of Geryon and his cattle. No one had ever dared approach the giant's herd, not only because of the distance, but also because of their master's terrifying reputation and the guardians who protected them. Geryon was a hideous creature, a monster of epic proportions that defied nature itself. He had 3 bodies fused into one, each with its own head, arms, and legs, joined at the waist. This grotesque structure made him a formidable foe, capable of attacking from multiple directions and withstanding blows that would kill any mortal. His appearance was nightmarish, an aberration that inspired terror. The giant also had a guardian worthy of his own monstrosity. His watchdog was the fearsome Orthrus, a hellish creature with 2 heads and a serpent's tail that hissed and struck like a living whip. Orthrus was the brother of Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guarded the gates of Hades, and of other legendary monsters, all offspring of the monstrous Echidna and the colossal Typhon. His ferocity was legendary, and he was an unrelenting protector of the herd. No sooner had Hercules set foot on the island than Orthus, sniffing out the intruder, rushed forward in a savage rage, barking and growling, his serpent tails snapping in the air. But Hercules, well acquainted with fighting mythical beasts, stood firm. The creature's twin heads struck simultaneously, and its venomous tail lashed like a whip. It was a deadly foe. But even Orthrus, with all his infernal lineage, proved no match for Hercules' strength and skill. With a well-aimed blow from his mighty club, the hero slew the two-headed dog, silencing its infernal barks forever. Hercules, stealthily and with great caution, began herding Geryon's cattle, a herd of unmatched beauty, trying not to draw the giant's attention, who could be anywhere on the island. But Hercules' actions, no matter how discreet, did not escape Geryon. The giant, alerted by the goddess Hera herself, realized his prized cattle were being stolen. Overcome with colossal fury, he charged into battle, a whirlwind of muscle and weaponry, determined to crush the intruder who had dared challenge him. The battle between Hercules and Geryon was one of the most intense and brutal the hero had ever faced. With his three bodies, Geryon wielded multiple weapons and shields, attacking from every direction. His strength was immense, and his strikes were devastating, capable of shattering boulders. Hercules found himself at a terrible disadvantage, defending against simultaneous attacks, dodging spears, and desperately seeking an opening in the giant's triple form. The fight dragged on, and for a moment it seemed Hercules might finally be defeated. Geryon's strikes were relentless, and his stamina appeared endless. At the height of the battle, as Hercules neared exhaustion, he sensed something else. Hera, his eternal nemesis, was aiding Geryon. She wasn't merely watching. She was imbuing the giant with divine courage and strength, whispering strategies into his ears, renewing his might with every blow. The presence of the goddess, though invisible to mortal eyes, was clear to Hercules, who recognized the divine interference behind Geryon's unnatural resilience. The hero's fury surged as he realized Hera's hand in the fight. In an act of unprecedented defiance for a mortal, or even a demigod, Hercules took up his bow and shot an arrow straight at the goddess. The arrow struck Hera, causing her immense pain and deep humiliation. Wounded by such a bold assault, she fled back to Olympus in shock. With Hera gone, the tide of battle began to turn in Hercules' favor. Now free to unleash his full strength, he drew one of his special arrows, those tipped with the deadly venom of the Lernaean Hydra. The poison was unmatched in potency, capable of killing even immortals. The arrow hit Geryon. The Hydra's venom took effect quickly and with terrifying force. Despite his monstrous strength and durability, Geryon fell, writhing in agony. His many heads screamed, his limbs convulsed, and life drained from his triple body in slow, excruciating death, until the giant lay motionless. With the monster defeated, Hercules was finally able to return to Greece, driving Geryon's prized cattle before him. But the journey home proved no less perilous than the quest itself. Along the way, he faced further dangers, including the giant Caucasus in Italy, who tried to steal the cattle, and hostile tribes that sought to block his passage. Yet with each new trial, Hercules showed his strength and cunning, overcoming every obstacle. At last, after an epic odyssey that took him to the edge of the world and back, he delivered the cattle to Eurystheus, completing his 10th labor and further securing his legend as the greatest of heroes. Once again, Hercules found himself on a journey that would take him to the very edge of the known world. This time, his penultimate labor, imposed by the ever dissatisfied and envious King Eurystheus, was a challenge woven with ancient legends and divine secrets. At first glance, the order seemed simple. He was to locate the famous garden of the Hesperides and return with one of its legendary golden apples. The garden's location was a mystery, but its guardians were so formidable that few would even dare dream of confronting them. The origin of these apples reached back to the earliest days of the gods, when Hera, the queen of Olympus and Hercules' bitter enemy, married Zeus, the king of the skies. She was gifted by Gaia, the primordial Mother Earth, with a tree of unmatched beauty. From this sacred tree grew golden apples that granted immortality and eternal youth to those who ate them. It was a divine treasure, symbolizing the love and union of the supreme gods, planted in the farthest western lands where the sun sets. This tree, heavy with precious fruit, was protected with the greatest care. Its guardians were the beautiful and gentle Hesperides, nymphs of the sunset, daughters of Atlas, whose enchanting songs enveloped the garden. But the true watchman was Ladon, a colossal and terrifying dragon who never slept, whose blazing eyes could detect the slightest intrusion. In his long and uncertain quest for the garden of the Hesperides, Hercules wandered through wild and desolate lands, guided only by ancient stories. His odyssey led him to the jagged mountains of the Caucasus. There he came upon a sight that shocked him deeply and stirred his compassion. Prometheus, the Titan of cunning, was chained to a rock and suffering an eternal punishment imposed by Zeus. His crime? Stealing sacred fire from Olympus and giving it to mankind, bestowing upon them knowledge, civilization, and the power to shape their own destiny. His punishment was cruel and everlasting. Every day, a massive, vile bird sent by the gods descended from the sky to devour his liver, causing excruciating pain. Each night, his liver would regenerate, only for the torment to resume the next day endlessly. Hercules, moved by his generous heart and hatred for tyranny, saw the Titans suffering and realized Prometheus had endured enough. That divine justice had turned to unending cruelty. The son of Zeus did not hesitate. He raised his bow, aimed with precision, and slew the monstrous bird, finally ending the Titans' daily torture. Then, with his unmatched strength, Hercules shattered the adamantine chains binding Prometheus to the cliff, freeing him from his eternal torment. And thus Prometheus, the benefactor of humanity, was finally freed, thanks to Hercules' act of mercy and justice, a gesture that subtly defied Zeus's will. As a token of deep gratitude for his liberation, Prometheus, who possessed the gift of foresight, offered Hercules priceless advice. He pointed the hero toward the location of the garden and warned him that facing Ladon directly would be a suicidal effort, even for someone like Hercules. Brute strength would not be enough against an immortal and ever-watchful guardian. Instead, Prometheus advised Hercules not to fight the dragon, but to seek help from the Titan Atlas, father of the Hesperides. Only Atlas, due to his kinship with the nymphs and knowledge of the garden, could retrieve the apples without triggering the dragon's wrath. Continuing his journey, now with a clear direction, Hercules traveled to the far west, to the lands where the sky meets the earth. There, he finally encountered the mighty Titan Atlas, a vision of grandeur and unimaginable suffering. Atlas, too, was enduring a punishment imposed by Zeus, a cosmic burden that condemned him to a life of torment. Atlas had sided with the other Titans in their war against Zeus and the Olympian gods during the Titanomachy, the great war that shaped the cosmos. After their defeat, Zeus handed Atlas the most terrible and symbolic punishment. He was condemned to bear the weight of the celestial vault on his shoulders for all eternity. There he stood, a colossal figure, muscles strained under the effort, his face marked by pain and exhaustion, supporting the very heavens, bearing stars, clouds, and destinies upon his back. Hercules explained his mission, and upon hearing that the hero sought the apples from his own daughter's garden, Atlas saw a unique opportunity for momentary relief from his eternal suffering. He offered to retrieve the apples himself, on the condition that Hercules, with his legendary strength, take his place holding up the sky while he visited the garden of the Hesperides. Hercules, understanding the gravity of the request and the magnitude of the task, accepted the proposal. With a mighty roar of effort, he hoisted the heavy vault of the heavens onto his shoulders, feeling the crushing weight of the universe bear down on him. His muscles burned, his legs trembled, but he stood firm, enduring, for a brief and agonizing moment, the burden that Atlas had carried for millennia. It was an unbearable weight that tested the very limits of physical and mental endurance. Relieved of his millennia-long torment, Atlas set off toward the Garden of the Hesperides. Time passed slowly for Hercules. Each second beneath the sky's weight felt like a lifetime of suffering. At last, the Titan returned. He brought with him the gleaming golden apples that Hercules had been sent to retrieve. Seeing the hero bowed under the heavens, Atlas, smiling slyly and speaking with a tone that bordered on mockery, said, "Here are the apples, Hercules. See? I got them. But don't worry, my friend. You've done the hardest part. I'll deliver them to King Eurystheus myself. After all, I'm much stronger and faster. And surely this journey has worn you out, hasn't it?" Atlas had no intention of resuming his cosmic burden. He had found his loophole, his escape from eternal torment, and he intended to take advantage of Hercules' supposed naivete. But Hercules, though exhausted and nearly crushed by the sky, was also a hero of great wit and cunning. He immediately recognized the trap. The Titan, in his newfound freedom, was trying to trick him, condemning him to carry the weight of the world forever. "Oh, how kind of you! Truly, I can't bear the thought of facing my cousin Eurystheus again. Your offer is generous, and I accept it with gratitude. But before you go, may I ask one small favor? Could you just hold the heavens for a moment? Just long enough for me to adjust my lion skin cloak. It's, bunched up under the weight. You understand how uncomfortable it is. One quick adjustment, and I'll be able to bear it much better." Atlas, well aware of the discomfort, agreed without suspicion, never imagining that Hercules was outsmarting him. As soon as the Titan lifted the celestial vault back onto his shoulders, Hercules, swift as lightning, snatched up the golden apples lying at his feet. Without a second glance or a word of thanks, he turned his back on the Titan and walked away, leaving Atlas once again trapped in his eternal punishment. Returning to Mycenae with the legendary golden apples of the Hesperides, Hercules was greeted with applause and celebration from Eurystheus' subjects. The king, however, consumed with jealousy and frustration over yet another triumph, concluded that there was only one way to be rid of Hercules once and for all. He must be sent to the realm of the dead, to Hades, for his 12th and most terrifying labor. The legend of the 12 labors of Hercules was nearing its final and most dramatic chapter. After completing 11 labors everyone had deemed impossible, tasks that had taken him to the edges of the earth and imagination, Hercules had become a legendary figure, beloved and revered by the Greeks. Each monstrous creature he slew, each tyrant he overthrew, each task he accomplished only served to cement his reputation as the greatest of heroes, a true benefactor of humankind. Eurystheus' cunning plan to destroy the son of Zeus through deadly challenges had failed spectacularly. Rather than falling into ruin, with each trial, Hercules achieved even greater glory, overshadowing the king's own authority. Eurystheus' envy and despair reached their peak. He knew that, according to the oracle, he had the right to assign only one more task to Hercules, the 12th and final one. This was his last, desperate chance to rid himself of the hero once and for all. His mind racing for the most impossible and terrifying mission, Eurystheus conceived a labor that he believed would mean Hercules' ultimate end. The king ordered Hercules to descend into the underworld and return with the legendary Cerberus, Hades' three-headed hound. Before departing for the dark and mysterious realm of Hades, Hercules, with his customary prudence and respect for divine laws, sought purification and spiritual guidance. He traveled to Eleusis, an ancient and sacred religious center, where he was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. These secret and sacred rites, dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, symbolized death and rebirth, the cycles of nature, and the promise of life after death for those initiated. His participation in these mysteries purified him of the stains of his previous labors, but also prepared him spiritually and made him fit to journey into the underworld and return, granting him a deeper understanding of the realms of life and death, knowledge essential for his upcoming quest. With his soul cleansed and mind prepared, Hercules made his way to a secret cave deep in Laconia, which served as one of the few known passages to the underworld. Right at the entrance, as if to guide him on his ominous journey, he was greeted by his divine brother Hermes. The messenger god was also the psychopomp, the guide of souls to Hades' realm. His presence signaled divine approval of Hercules' mission, and his swift, clever figure was the only light in the deepening gloom. Guided by the messenger god, with his staff and winged hat, Hercules ventured into the depths of the underworld. It was a sinister place, vast and oppressive, filled with a palpable sorrow, where the murmur of lost souls was the only melody, and hope seemed to have no place. In the realm of Hades, Hercules and Hermes passed through various haunted corners, watching the souls of the dead wander through the fields of asphodel. In the midst of this desolation, the demigod found a familiar figure, still alive, chained to a rock. It was his friend Theseus, the hero of Athens, imprisoned due to his own recklessness. Theseus had been punished by Hades for attempting, along with his impetuous companion Pirithous, to kidnap Persephone, queen of the underworld, in an act of supreme audacity and disrespect for the gods. He had been detained and condemned to oblivion. Hercules, moved by loyalty and compassion, decided he would not leave his friend behind. He broke the chains, allowing Theseus to finally return to the world of the living, though forever marked by his harrowing ordeal. Hercules' journey then brought him to the banks of the river Acheron, the dark and muddy waters that separated the world of the living from the realm of the dead. There, he encountered Charon, the ferryman, who transported souls across the river in his decrepit boat. Charon, faithful to the laws of the underworld, refused to help Hercules, a living being, enter his master's realm without the proper rite or the coin for the dead. But Hercules never accepted no for an answer. With a voice that thundered like a storm, he threatened to destroy Charon and his frail boat if he didn't ferry him across immediately. The hero's imposing strength and barely contained fury were so tangible that, under such a threat, Charon had no choice but to do as Hercules demanded. Reluctantly, he guided the boat across the dark waters, breaking the barrier between the living and the dead. On the other shore, Hades himself, the formidable lord of the underworld, was already waiting. The meeting between Zeus's son and the dreadful master of the dead was a moment of supreme tension. Hercules requested permission to take Cerberus, the three-headed guardian hound, with him and present it to Eurystheus, making a solemn promise to return the dog once his labor was complete. The request was audacious, but Hercules remained respectful, aware of the authority and power of the god before him. Hades observed the hero with a deep, penetrating gaze. He, who was rarely impressed, recognized the bravery and resolve in Hercules. The god allowed Hercules to attempt capturing the three-headed dog, but imposed a non-negotiable condition, a challenge that would test the demigod's true strength and courage. Hercules was to use only his bare hands to subdue the beast. No weapons, no tricks, just the hero's raw strength and will. It was a fair challenge, worthy of the guardian of the underworld and of the hero seeking his final purification. With Hades' permission, the hero went to confront the monster. Hercules knew he was about to face the fiercest of creatures, an animal that was the last obstacle to his freedom. At the sight of it, Hercules was not surprised by its enormity. The beast was even more imposing than legend had described. Its claws were sharp as blades, and its bark was a roar that echoed through the shadowy valleys of the underworld, capable of paralyzing any mortal with fear. The son of Zeus had already battled all kinds of fantastic creatures, and would not be intimidated by yet another monstrous offspring of Echidna. The battle between the demigod and the monster was an unparalleled test of strength and endurance. Cerberus lunged at Hercules with unmatched ferocity, its 3 heads attacking simultaneously, trying to bite and tear him apart. Hercules, unarmed, used his brute strength, agility, and combat experience. He grabbed the dog's 3 heads, attempting to immobilize them, feeling the heat of its infernal breath and the pressure of its fangs. With muscles strained to their limit, he resisted the beast's blows and onslaughts. The fight stretched on for a long, exhausting time, an epic duel in the depths of the world of the dead. Finally, after an overwhelming display of strength and persistence, Hercules at last subdued the creature. Exhausted and defeated, the hound was completely overpowered by the hero's indomitable force. With Cerberus subdued, Hercules tied the dog with chains he had brought and led it out of the underworld, heading for the surface. The ascent was a stark contrast. From the darkness and oppressive silence of Hades' realm, they emerged into the bright light and fresh air of the world of the living. The infernal dog, accustomed to darkness and the scent of death, had a violent reaction to the sunlight and open air. Cerberus became nauseous and vomited. From the spot where the animal's vomit fell, poisonous plants began to grow. Despite its continued resistance and barks and howls that terrified every living being in its path, Hercules dragged the creature across all of Greece, a terrifying sight that caused panic wherever it passed, until they reached the palace of King Eurystheus in Mycenae. There, he presented the beast to his master, proving that he had completed the most impossible of all tasks. At the sight of such a monster, pure terror seized Eurystheus. The king, who had conceived the labor as a death sentence, fled in panic at the sight of the 3-headed dog and hid inside his bronze jar. Cerberus was released as promised, and Hercules, true to his word, ensured that the dog returned safely to the underworld to resume his vigil at the gates of Hades' realm. Hercules had finally completed his 12th and final labor. Eurystheus, resigned and utterly defeated in his obsession to destroy Hercules, released the demigod from his service, no longer daring to challenge him. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The labors had come to an end. Hercules had reached the peak of his glory. He was no longer just a hero. He was seen as the greatest benefactor of humankind, the liberator of monsters, and the one who surpassed all limits. His legend would echo across Greece and beyond, making him a symbol of strength, perseverance, and justice. But this was not the end of his journey. The son of Zeus would still face great trials and adventures, both in the mortal world and among the gods, before finally attaining immortality and ascending to Olympus to sit beside his father as a god.